Hello and welcome to today's Wednesday webinar. The topic is building resilience to support mental health and well-being through Erasmus+. Just to let you know who is in the room from Lurgas. So Tomas is here from the Programme Support Development, who supports VET and schools, and then myself for Programme Support and Development for Youth. We also have Alex here, who will be providing some tech support during the event. So to give you an indication of the running order, we've already kind of done a bit of the intro and housekeeping. I'm going to then talk you through some of the context of Erasmus Plus and link it to the topic of mental health and well-being. Then I'll pass over to our first guest speaker, Nora Furlang, who'll be talking about the Breathing Spaces project. And then from there, we'll move on to our second guest speaker, Grania Hickey, who will talk a little bit about the story of Thrive. And then our final speaker, Margaret Harnett from Conleth Infant School, talking about their project. At the end of the event, Tomas is going to guide us through a Q&A, some harvesting resources and an evaluation if we have time. So I just wanted to start with a little bit of the context of Erasmus Plus to make sure we're all familiar. So Erasmus Plus is the EU programme that supports education, training, youth and sports in Europe. And Lurgas is the national agency for a number of the different sectors involved in that programme, including adult education, school education, vocational education and training, and youth. And then today, just to say that today's event is cross-sectoral, so we do have some speakers from the different sectors. So the objectives of programmes like Erasmus Plus they really play a big part in upholding fundamental values of the EU, including human dignity, equality, democracy, and human rights. Erasmus Plus also helps to strengthen solidarity and inclusion and to promote active citizenship and engagement in civic society. So this is kind of an overview of the objectives that you can get a bit more specific, especially with the different sectors, but you can kind of really see how the topic of mental health and well-being is already kind of linked here with things like human dignity and inclusion and stuff like that. But that's just an overview. So why the topic of mental health and well-being? So we were really seeing a lot more projects across the sectors focusing on mental health and well-being specifically. And this could be in part due to the increased policy focus at a national and international level on mental health and well-being. And then also a lot of policy frameworks and initiatives at international and national levels also feature health and well-being. Just to give you an indication of what they are. So at an international level, we have the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So this explicitly notes physical and mental health and social and spiritual and moral well-being. Then the EU Youth Strategy aims to support the physical and mental health and well-being of young people. And then there's the specific European Youth Goal entitled Mental Health and Well-being. At a national level, we have the National Youth Strategy. We also have Better Outcomes, Brighter Futures. So there's the outcome, active, healthy, physical and mental well-being. And then Healthy Ireland, a framework for improved health and well-being. In that it states everyone can enjoy physical and mental well-being to their full potential, where well-being is valued and supported at every level of society and is everyone's responsibility. So these policies and strategies might inform projects that have already happened, or they could inform if you were planning to actually create a project around this particular topic area. So why Erasmus Plus? So why an Erasmus Plus project? So Erasmus Plus provides organizations with opportunities to build partnerships. So this can bring a European dimension to their work in order to address some of these priority areas or issues. And then that can lead to a community of practice. It can support the exchange of ideas and experiences and practices, supporting the topic of mental health and well-being. It can build the capacity of organizations to approach this topic. And it can also provide an opportunity for staff to upskill and enhance their professional development. And that then can be brought back to the organization and the young people or the students that they work with. So that's just kind of a very, very quick summary, quick overview of Erasmus Plus and linking it to kind of the topic of mental health and well-being. I am going to hand over to the guest speakers now. So as I said, the first guest speaker will be Nora, and then from Nora we'll pass over to Grania, and then from Grania, Margaret. So I'm going to stop sharing now and then hand over to Nora if you're ready to.
Okay, thanks Audrey. Thanks for inviting me to share today. Yeah, my name is Nora. I'm living down here in New Ross, County Wexford, and I run a voluntary organisation, I guess. It's not quite an organisation yet, but we're working towards it being an organisation. And at the moment, I'm working with young women aged between 18 and 26, roughly. There's some older volunteers as well. And all of our activities are centred around wellbeing. It's a young women's wellbeing programme, and it's called Breathing Space. And we accessed an Erasmus Plus grant. It was a Key Action 2 Transnational Youth Initiative grant. And this grant allowed us to work in partnership with our partners in Spain. It began in September 2019 and is due to finish in December 2020. And our activities included meetings here throughout that entire duration with our group here in New Ross, and 2 LTTs they're called. So that's the mobility area of the grant. So we spent a week in Spain last November, and we were due to host the Spanish young women here in Wexford last April, and that was cancelled because of COVID-19. And then we rescheduled it to happen later this year, naively, and it's been cancelled again. So we're still trying to maintain a strong focus on well-being in these times. So it kind of puts everything in perspective, and the tools for resilience, that's what our project is called. This particular project is called Tools for Resilience and Wellbeing, that we learned in Spain last November. We're trying to practice. Yeah, so I have a couple of slides to share today, just to give the essence of the kind of work that we're doing. And as part of this Erasmus Plus grant, we have been working on developing a website, and I'll share that with you today as well. But the website is a work in progress, so there's loads of typos and mistakes and things wrong. So if you spot them, we're working on them. It's not really ready to be launched yet, but it's useful to share today. So I'm going to share my screen and show you this website, which I think you can see now. Yes. Yeah, so Breathing Space, we are, I ran a project here in New Ross in 2014 with a group of teenagers, and at the time I volunteered with the local youth services, so they were able to support us with all the technical things like public liability insurance and a space to work in and a bank account. And I applied for a grant through Erasmus Plus and worked with a partner in Sardinia and took a group of teenagers from New Ross out to Sardinia and hosted a group of young people from Sardinia here in Wexford. And that was a successful project. It was working with young people who would be considered from hard to reach groups, and they yeah, we had it was challenging at times, but we had a really positive experience. And those teenagers, yeah, it didn't work for me to do those kind of large scale projects as a volunteer in the local youth services after that, and it was a huge piece of work to do in a voluntary capacity. So I kind of had to take a break from it after that finished in 2016. But those teenagers grew up, and particularly the girls, the young women, were always saying to me, Nora, we have to start something up. We have to do a project like that again. So the time was right to get that off the ground in the last couple of years. But we had to establish ourselves to work independently. So Breathing Space was born, and at the moment it's like a voluntary association, but we do hope to grow it into becoming a legit organisation with a charity status in time. So that's where we're at with that. So this particular transnational youth initiative, it's a Key Action 2 project within the field of youth. It started in September 2019, and its title is Tools for Wellbeing and Resilience. So some of the core concepts that we're exploring in this project, the idea is that if we start with our own well-being, so the first leg of the project was very much around your own personal awareness and kind of acknowledging your strengths and your weaknesses in how we connect to our own sense of well-being. And our partners in Spain are, they run a permaculture farm and a retreat center, and there's lots of yoga happening over there, and there's an amazing restaurant with vegetarian food that's picked from the permaculture farm, and it's kind of a community of well-being in itself. And they were really keen to bring young people into the space, so this project meant that that could happen. So we went over there last November, and the first leg of the project really was around learning techniques that we can practice ourselves to enhance our own sense of well-being, and the young women really connected strongly to this. And the idea is, in that connecting to our sense of well-being, we build resilience in dealing with the stress that life throws at us. The tools that we're using are creative tools, movement, and nature, being outside as much as possible. And some of the girls that we're working with, this is quite new to them, and it's a struggle and a challenge, but they're learning how worthwhile it is. So we connect outside as much as possible, and in these times of COVID, that's the only way we can really connect. There's a big focus on inclusion. So some of the young women would have been quite isolated in their communities, not in education or training, needs, I guess, that concept. Some of them were young single mums, and they couldn't participate because they didn't have supported childcare. So we tried to overcome as many barriers as possible, and ended up even taking a child out to Spain with 2 children out to Spain with us last November, so that one young mother could participate. And as we grow, Breathing Space is attracting quite a number of young women with small children, which I think is really exciting. And it's happening quite organically. There's a need for space for young women to be together, and with children as well. It means more can be included. So another part of the programme, and I guess within the context of Erasmus+, the whole area around intercultural learning and awareness, and that started back in 2014 in the initial project with some of the girls. It looked at stereotyping and how we view others and people who are different from us. And this remains constant now, and we talk a lot about developing empathy and looking at who in our own community needs to be included and who can we reach out to. The active participation of young people is another core objective of this project. So it's young people coming together with their ideas and making stuff happen, essentially. And in doing this, we're looking at how we can contribute to positive youth culture in the town and beyond. So there's a lot of focus on youth leadership and the role that young people can play in creating positive community environments. And then we haven't gotten to this stage yet, but this was where the project was meant to go, in that looking, starting internally and looking at our own sense of well-being, but then looking more externally and what impacts on our well-being, and the environment that we live in impacts on our well-being. And there was going to be a focus on environment and sustainability. So that's part of the next steps of this project. So essentially the ethos that that's informing the approaches is that participating or just connecting to other young people or having that sense of belonging is good for you. So really strongly equating youth participation with a sense of well-being. And we're also working from the premise that healthier individuals contribute to healthier communities, so that us as a group of young women, I shouldn't include myself in that, but essentially that we're thinking that we can contribute to more resilient communities in looking after our own health, and that a greater sense of well-being gives us greater capacity and confidence to connect to others and make things happen in our town. And these kind of concepts are really the young people are in the group really connect to these concepts, and they want to see positive change happen in the town, and they appreciate that that starting point is looking at our own sense of well-being and our own resilience. So a lot of what's informing our work, and I'm just going to share my screen again, is this resource that I worked on. Nope, that's not it, sorry. This resource that I worked on a number of years ago. It's called Creativity, Resilience and Global Citizenship. So the approach of this project has been informed by this resource, and I'll share it with you later. And there's a lot of focus on the 5 ways of well-being. So I'm using these 5 ways of well-being.
Sorry, Nora, you're not sharing the link. If you want to click the link there in the presentation.
Oh, sorry.
You're just sharing the presentation, but it will go from the presentation, maybe.
Okay, okay.
Sorry.
Go back. Thanks, Thomas. I have to find my link again for my presentation. No, it won't. I'm just going to stop my screen share and go back to the link again. Here it is. So this is what I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you how I'm using the 5 ways of well-being to as a tool for reflection with the young women. So we took, for example, the concept of give, and how does this project support us to give? How does the project support us to take notice? How is it supporting us to be active, to connect and to keep learning? So we're kind of highlighting how just by participating in the project in itself is enhancing our own sense of well-being, and the response was quite powerful. And we're looking then at, we're using the head, heart and hands, and we added in health approach to becoming more active in our communities, and that drawing on our knowledge, our values, our health and our skills encourages us and supports us to be competent, active citizens that can contribute to positive change in the community. So the young people have connected really strongly to these approaches. And I'm just going to stop my screen share now again and show you the website. If I can find it, website. So this is the Creativity and Change resource that I mentioned that we can share. Can you see my website now? Yeah, so the Breathing Space website has developed as a resource as part of this grant, and it gives a little bit of background on what we do. There's a group of us out in Spain last November. That was more recently, that was in August when the first lockdown finished. We went out kayaking together, and that was a really wonderful day. So our group has grown all by itself from, I think we started off with 10 young women, and now we're up to 16 or 17. So there's people connecting to us as we go. And if you look at our projects page, it'll bring you into this particular Erasmus Plus project. And also one of the outcomes of the project, the idea was, as I mentioned, in connecting to our own sense of well-being and in building resilience, it gives us greater capacity to contribute to our local community. So we had designed a local action. The idea was that us here in Ireland and our Spanish partners would design a local action. So the action that the young people here designed was a summer camp that we managed to implement in August as well. We planned it and we worked on youth leadership training and designing a summer camp all during lockdown. And as soon as the lockdown lifted and we were able to connect with groups, we managed to deliver this summer camp. And we targeted children in the town that wouldn't ordinarily be able to do summer camps, because summer camps are expensive. So we offered it at €15 per person for a week. And all of the young people, we identified roles and responsibilities, and they were able to design workshops. Some of them had more background roles in organising or outreach to the parents. They all did Garda vetting and Garda training, and all activities were focused on well-being. And it was an absolutely amazing experience. And this is some of the feedback from the young people afterwards. So we explored the concept of youth leadership and what it means to them and its importance in our town and in all towns. And some of the feedback, like it's about being part of something bigger than myself and making a positive impact on my community. Youth leadership is about creating relationships in a judgment-free space in order to learn from each other. Yeah, so there's lots of feedback, and then we documented the activities that we did with the children so that other groups might be able to do something similar if they wanted to. And we did a lot of reflection on what worked well and what didn't work so well, and what have you learned about yourself and what can we do more of in the future. So it was really positive, and the children themselves that took part had a really brilliant week. They needed it after the lockdown, and it was an opportunity for them to be with kids that they're not usually part of. So that was our last day, our last celebration. So we were able to work with 15 children for that week. The space we had limited the amount of children we could work with, but 15 was probably a good number for us to start with, and we hope to deliver more projects like that in the future. And I just want to show one more thing here, and then I'll stop because I'm sure my time must be up. I wanted to show, yeah, there's some nice feedback from the young people on their after their trip to Spain. So I think it's here. These are some of the concepts, some of the written statements that came back from the young people in Spain, that it's easier to be compassionate when you're happy, and I'm learning to love myself. And gratitude is easier when you can self-love and put yourself in other people's shoes. So the feedback was really profound. And there's lots of it. It makes me think of a more caring world and how we need to practice being non-judgmental and redirect our thoughts in a more understanding way. So the experience in Spain went deeper than I had anticipated. And the outcomes are that we've delved deeper into other topics in well-being, and in the future the girls have expressed that they would love to do more work around nutrition and food. That was a big thing when we went to Spain. Some of them absolutely hated the amazing food that was put in front of them. And we so we've plans to really want to do more skills-based work around cookery and nutrition, which I'm very excited about. And there's been lots of talk as well about doing workshops and learning around consent and sexual health and relationships. So the outcomes were kind of rolling. We started off quite broadly, and now it's narrowed down itself. And our partners in Spain are keen to continue to work with us and support us. But something that's been really challenging is that this was a very much a capacity building program for our Spanish partners who didn't have relationships already established with a group of young people and who don't come from a youth work background. And a big part of our exchange was that we on the New Ross side would support in that area, and that they would support us in the specific well-being and tools for resilience area. But it's been hard to build that capacity given COVID. So we have committed to continuing working together and just take our time in building those partnerships, because we believe that there's been such mutual benefit on both sides despite the challenges. I think that's enough for me for now. And if there's any questions or if there's anything I haven't covered, we can come back to it. Is that okay?
That's great. Thanks so much, Nora. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
We're going to pass over to Grania now, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks. And I'd just like to say that presentation was absolutely fascinating, Nora. I'd love to find out more about the project. So I'm going to just give you a very brief overview of our Thrive program. So you can all see my screen now, can you?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So basically, like, Thrive is, so just to introduce myself first, I'm Grania Hickey, and I'm the Research and Projects Manager at an organisation called the Institute of Child Education and Psychology Europe. And we are an independent research and training institute. We have worked on a number of Erasmus Plus projects before. but this was our first project that we were coordinating. And we work with a number of partners across Europe on this project, some of them whom we had worked with before and others which were a new partnership for us. And I suppose the what Thrive is about is really about developing a trauma-informed training kind of package or package of materials for educators who are working in second chance education settings across Europe. And our partners brought together a mix of psychologists, educators, youth workers and practitioners. And that kind of, I suppose, rich mix was really influential in developing the materials. And also, I suppose, what it has helped us to do is to build our partnerships across Europe and our capacity. So just to mention some of our partners briefly, here in Ireland, we work with Kildare, Wicklow, ETB. Across Europe, then we work with partners in Austria who are working with refugee groups, in Romania with a school working with children coming from orphanages, and then we also work with partners in Italy who work with youth in youth work, and in Italy, Malta as well, with the University of Malta, who are academics working in the area of resilience and well-being. Okay, our own background then is in psychology, and we offer kind of training in resilience and well-being and continuous professional development in kind of inclusion and positive psychology. Okay. So just to very, very briefly go into some of the background of the project, I suppose. Firstly, where our focus is on trauma and on developing a trauma-informed education program which can promote trauma-informed practice in educational settings with a specific focus on second chance education settings. So it's about helping to re-engage young early school leavers in education through a trauma-informed framework. And I suppose why trauma? Firstly, because we know that trauma is actually really common. The prevalence is very high, and it can affect young people. It can affect their schooling and their personal lives in various ways, and go on to have very long-lasting and significant consequences. So, trauma-informed approach in education is a way of breaking that cycle and promoting positive outcomes. So, what I suppose some of the key principles which underpin trauma-informed education are really about realizing and recognizing what trauma is and how it affects people, and then introducing responses in an educational setting which recognizes the effects of trauma and resists re-traumatization. So that was, I suppose, the motivation for our project, to help introduce these principles and strengthen these principles within second chance education settings across Europe, and for those who are working in an educational context with young, vulnerable youth. So just very briefly, I suppose what trauma, refers to a number of different things. And just to kind of, I suppose, highlight here, some of the graphics that I'm showing you here are graphics that we have developed for our materials, which will be in an online, a free to access online platform. So these are the types of materials that we are developing for our trauma-informed educational program. And they help to create, I suppose, knowledge and awareness of trauma and what trauma is, and to also create, I suppose, capacity for responding in a trauma-informed or a trauma-sensitive way. So trauma can refer to kind of like a one-off event, such as maybe a car crash or a bereavement, but it can also refer to, I suppose, a more long-lasting experience of fear and distress. So some of our partners will be working, for example, with children who grew up in our orphanages, refugees who grew up in war-torn circumstances. So trauma can refer to those effects, but it can also, I suppose, refer to a developmental trauma where the experience of care in youth has been disrupted. And adverse childhood experiences is something that is receiving increased attention. And adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, can refer to the experience of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse in youth, emotional or physical neglect, and also to the experience of disrupted or household dysfunction, such as the experience of mental health problems in the family, criminality, violence in the community, social conflict, prejudice, discrimination and marginalization, and also the experience of family separation or substance abuse in the home or in the community. And as I said earlier on, the prevalence of trauma is much higher than previously realized. Approximately 60% of the population experience at least one ACE, and there's a smaller proportion who would experience 4 or more. And when you reach that kind of level of experiencing 4 or more ACEs, the impacts can be quite severe. So those who experience 4 or more ACEs are significantly more likely to experience disrupted development and impairments in their social, emotional, and their cognitive development. And that goes on to have an impact on their experience of school, their learning. And those who experience 4 or more ACEs are twice as likely to actually leave school early. And this is, I suppose, shown in research that's been conducted here in Ireland recently. And we know that young people in youth reach settings, which is a second chance educational program in Ireland, 65% of those students attending youth reach settings have been found to have 4 or more ACEs, and that's associated then with very high levels of mental health distress and also involvement in the criminal justice system. And as we know, if that trauma isn't affected, it can go on to affect them throughout their life, and it's associated with the adoption of risky health behaviours, increased risk of substance abuse, smoking, and risky sexual behaviours, which then increase the risk of health morbidities, increase the risk of health problems, and even early death later on in life. So our approach to developing the Thrive programme and how we went about it, conducting our project, I suppose we adopted a very participatory approach. And as I mentioned, our team brought together a range of different organizations and capacities and disciplines. So we worked kind of with psychologists, educational psychologists, educators from across Europe, and youth practitioners. And this helped us both set the foundation for our program. And also we also adopted a participatory inquiry-based approach. So we really wanted the program to be, tailored in and rooted to the needs and the experiences of those who are working with young people and the young people themselves who have had these experiences and who are re-engaging in education. So the way we went about doing that was firstly doing a literature and policy review across the countries that are involved in our project to understand really like what's out there for young people who have left school early and who want to re-engage, and what are the policies, what are the services and supports in place for young people. We also then engaged in a research process where we spoke to young people in second chance education settings and to their educators. So in Ireland, we did a survey and focus groups with educators and with young people involved in Youth Reach. And that was also conducted across all the partner countries. And what our findings showed was that in this setting, there really was widespread awareness of trauma. And there was a lot of strong, really positive practice going on in these settings already. So there was a very strong focus on interpersonal relationships, building support for young people, and creating, I suppose, a positive behavioural support network for young people. So these were the strengths that we wanted to build on in our programme. And then we also found that there were some areas for need and areas where development was needed. In particular, there was a lack of kind of specific resources for trauma-informed practice for this group. And there was also, we also found very high levels of educator stress in our research as well. So we know that working with young people who have, you know, high levels of mental health difficulties and distress can, you know, have a significant impact on the educator and on those working with them as well. So we wanted to also address, I suppose, the trauma that the educator might experience in their practice and in their work. And overall then, you know, we found that there was a really strong interest in and support for trauma-informed practice. And just to kind of continue on that participatory approach to the work, once we had developed and drafted our trauma-informed materials, we went back to those that we had involved in our research and we piloted and we asked for feedback on our materials from those working in youth reach settings and in second chance education settings, so that we could hone and refine our materials, you know, to make sure that they would be suited to their needs and that they would be helpful and informative. So throughout, we've had a really strong kind of practical focus. We wanted to make sure that the materials had that strong practical focus as well, and that they would be useful resources which could be kind of there for educators that they can use on a constant and ongoing basis to kind of continually upskill and to refine their practice. So just to give you a very brief overview of what our Thrive program provides, and I'm not sure if anybody got to watch the video, but there was a video that's been sent out which can give you a kind of a brief introduction to our online package and how it's starting to shape up. And like Nora pointed out as well, it's still in the early days of development, so there's probably typos and things like that that need to be addressed. And we'll be working on that over the next couple of weeks to finalize that. So the package itself, I suppose, consists of several modules. And the first, so it includes an introduction to what trauma is, to really build knowledge and understanding of trauma. And we focused on I suppose, the neuroscience of trauma, how it affects people's development, and the pathways through which trauma can affect development. But we've also focused very strongly on the neuroscience of resilience and recovery, and how in kind of sensitive periods of development, and in adolescence in particular, we can harness brain development and brain plasticity to promote recovery from trauma and resilience. And following on from that, then I suppose there's two central pillars in our training materials. And the first is really on relationships. So we introduce the concept of attachment relationships and how practitioners and educators can promote a sense of safety and security in educational settings as the foundation for relationship development. And we also focus on positive relationship development and strengthening connection and belonging in educational settings, you know, with the student, the learner and the educator, but also with a peer network and beyond the educational setting as well. And then our second essential pillar is on resilience. So it's not just about addressing deficits or difficulties that the young person has, but also on really strengthening their skills, their capacity, their well-being. So providing educators with practical ways that they can promote resilience. And within this then as well, we also look at the educator themselves and how the educator can strengthen their own self-awareness and look after themselves and their own well-being, so that they can continue to work in a compassionate way with young people and avoid burnout and stress. So overall, we've adopted kind of a mixed theoretical approach, which has a really strong practical focus and a strengths-based approach, which we felt was really, really important. So we wanted to bring the science together with positive psychology and educational and practice and pedagogy. And we've done this in a number of ways. Firstly, we introduced kind of learner stories that are revisited throughout our package to illustrate trauma-informed ways of working and practice, to show really what can work. And that echoes some of the findings that we found in our research that brought out the kind of educator's voice and say, this is what we do with the young people that we work, that really helps to re-engage and build their skills. So we bring that into our package and our training materials. And we've also tried to create really accessible materials, such as the graphics that I've been showing, and also this one here, which creates a kind of I suppose, helps the educator to show how they can reframe how they see young people's behaviours so that they can respond in a more compassionate way. So that's just to kind of, I suppose, to finalize, that's it really. I suppose just to let you know where we are now. We are finalising our online resource and translating the English materials into several different languages, Romanian, Italian, Maltese and German. So that will be finished very soon, hopefully. And then we're also organising a launch, which will be our kind of multiplier event here in Ireland, which will be held in kind of mid to late November. And that launch will involve, again, we really want to bring the voice of the educator, the experience of key stakeholders into that launch. So we'll have presentations from educators in Youth Reach and members from the Thrive team as well presenting. So that's it. A very kind of just brief overview of our project. If you want to get in touch about anything, there's my contact details, and that just shows you all the partners that we've been working with on this project.
Thank you so much, Gronia. That was excellent. We had two very, very good, very informative presentations, and we still have one more from Margaret Harnett from St. Conlet's Infant School.
Hi, Thomas. Thank you so much. Two excellent presentations. I wish I was first and not last, but never mind. We'll just move on. I don't have any shared screens or anything. I work in an infant school in Newbridge. We're a feeder school to two senior schools. It's sort of a traditional infant school. Would have been a religious run school at one stage. But obviously there's been a huge change over the past number of years. When Thomas initially got in touch with us and asked us to speak about our second project, which was building resilience to support mental health and well-being. However, due to the COVID-19 situation, we were unable to partake in any of the mobilities with relation to that. However, we did begin the journey with our first project, which was promoting positive health and well-being in an infant school. And I suppose it does start down at our end, you know, the journey that people go on as they move through education. And also we felt that the staff needed some support as well along that. That was our first project. The reason we chose that was because we are a diverse school catering for children from the ages of 3 to 8 years. We have a staff of approximately 25 teachers, 9 SNAs and ancillary staff. We have a significant number of children who have English as an additional language. So it's well over 30% of our pupils. We also have 2 special classes and a diverse, really mixed population, which is absolutely wonderful. We have children coming from all backgrounds, professional, single parents, traveller, international, and it's a wonderful mix in the school. And I think my own children came to the school and I think they gained a lot from it. I suppose going back over the years, we would have always had a very positive attitude towards well-being, and we wanted to build resilience, I suppose, amongst the staff and the pupils. And given the current situation that we've had for the past 6 or 7 months, we are absolutely delighted that we did start on that journey. In the first project, there were just 2 of us actually involved in initiating getting in touch with Lerga. There was another teacher and myself, and Ken, we heard about it through word of mouth. And the other teacher, Emma, had a particular interest in yoga and mindfulness herself. We both travelled separately to the same course. I travelled with another teacher from another school that was partaking in it, and Emma went with her friend, actually from the same school, which was great. Now, we both chose our first course through Maxima TC, which is in Split in Croatia, and that course is called Stress Management and Burnout Prevention. We both did the same course, both Emma and myself, and I think we both got something very different from it. I think we're both at different stages in life and different stages in our career as well. So it was really good. And our learning outcomes included various mindfulness techniques, yoga techniques, and practical skills. And I think there was a very good insight into healthy diet and healthy mind. We found through the engagement there was a wonderful opportunity to meet, share experiences, share practice with teachers and staff members from all over Europe. And even we learned that Reunion Island, which is in the Pacific, is actually part of this program as well, which was wonderful. We met colleagues from Finland, Greece, Poland, Ireland. Part of the joy of being involved in it, we met up in the evening and shared food and drinks and went on tours together. The second mobility then, which was booked through the Europass agency, and that was called a Satisfying School Experience, Strategies and Skills for Teachers. And I participated in that course in Barcelona last Halloween, actually this time last year. Again, it was an excellent course facilitated by a psychologist from Italy. Areas it covered included positive education, understanding and preventing burnout, active listening, empathy, and practical activities were ongoing as well. And I have to say that it was absolutely, I think it was great fuel to help us deal with what we've dealt with in particular since schools opened in September, but also going back during the lockdown, I mean. We met wonderful colleagues from all over Europe, Romania, Bulgaria, Spain, Ireland, and from primary, secondary and third level in different, I suppose, different educational settings, similar to our situation here this morning. We were, I suppose, the courses were in beautiful places. Barcelona is a lovely cultural city, and I know we all came back invigorated and I suppose renewed. Now, I suppose Thomas asked me what were the main challenges that we met throughout the process. I suppose with applying for it, I think the main challenge I felt was working through the website. It's a bit of a gargantuan website, so, and the portal, so just hard to get your head around that. What I would say as well is to keep copies of everything and create a paper folder, I suppose. And we also found as well, when we came back, we found that more staff were thrilled to get involved, and we made an application then for the second project. We developed a policy then around I suppose all this, and I suppose it was like a clear setting out our agenda on that, and that was very good and clear. So we now have about 9 to 10 members of staff who are interested in getting involved. And I suppose there's been a massive positive impact in the school, on the teacher, on the staff. And going back to Nora, what Nora said initially, I think if people feel enabled, they can bring more to the table. If you, I suppose, it's put the oxygen on yourself, and then you can bring that to your children. The positive impact, we have developed a whole school policy on well-being. There's a better understanding also of where our European children are coming from, and the educational systems from which they came from, and possibly the educational systems that their parents, which we would have a lot of contact with, would have come through, and the difference. So I suppose it gives us a better understanding when we're dealing with parents as well. We found that we're better in empathetic listening, and we have, through our practice in school, implemented mindful techniques, really being in the present. Part of the online teaching during the lockdown was we had some classes of yoga classes for children, which was fantastic. We initiated celebrating culture and county days, so that our local children, I suppose Kildare and Newbridge in particular, would be a town where people from all over the country would naturally, I suppose, have come to because of its closeness to Dublin and work in the area. So we have international culture, but also county, and that was it was really embracing children from Ireland and from other countries overseas. And we really felt that the parents really got involved in that, and were absolutely thrilled to be included, and it was a fabulous success. And that was on a whole staff level, really. I think we developed a better awareness of where we are in relation to stress and burnout, and I suppose just to recognise the signs and then to do something about it. And I think for me as well, to recognise that in other people as well, which is good. I suppose the strategies that we've learned really, and I can't overstate how invaluable they have been over the past few months, and in particular since we reopened. We also, one of the teachers got involved in the Blue Star program as well, and she was initiating that and to research into that so that we can make an application towards that. We've also, and I suppose given the situation in schools, there's more of a focus on outside learning outdoors, and again, really wonderful in the current situation. I also brought back some classroom strategies for well-being and inclusiveness. I found it as well very good for my own personal development. We include some feedback to staff where there's an increased number of participants want to be involved in our next project. I just want to say a huge thanks to Erasmus for giving us the opportunity and for opening that door, and really looking forward to participating in the programme and developing the programme as we move on and once this situation is clarified. Okay, that's me done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margaret. That's great. I mean, you gave a great insight into your project and your experience. And that's why we also wanted the different focus of different project beneficiaries tackling similar issues from very different approaches. So just if you have 5 more minutes, I just want to bring you into Menti, which is a website I'm going to post on the chat. It's menti.com. And if you can open this in any browser or on your phone and tap the code 5003836. I put it in the chat there. So 5000836. And I'm going to share screen now. So I would like you to give input on any suggestions of resources, networks, policy, and literature on mental health and well-being. We already circulated the websites of your respective projects and your school, Margaret. But from any participant, if you can contribute with resources, recommendations, you can tap them there. It might take a while to get the responses. Did you all access Mentimeter there? Here we go. Burnout.ie, that's very good. Heard of them. You can include your website as well. Does anyone find it hard to join the Menti? The code is at the top there. Cosmic Kids, that's a new one. I haven't heard of that. And the projects we already saw, you can explore more about them. And Jigsaw.ie, of course, I share with you a blog we did back in May, I think, during the summer with Jigsaw. So I shared the link. Alex sent the link in the confirmation email yesterday, but I'm going to share the link again on the follow-up email with the presentations. There's youngminds.org.uk, sphe.ie. So we go into the next slide. Thank you very much for those. And PDST Wellbeing resource for teachers. Yeah, that's very good. Thank you. We have the following. I think people rated it already. Just a quick evaluation of this webinar for the ones that haven't inputted anything yet. Excellent, thank you. Now, if you can just give us some feedback, what did you find most useful today? Resources. Very interesting personal experiences. Very good. We have a few there. But if you haven't used Menti, this is a very useful tool as well. You can use for your workshops or with your learners or participants in any activity. Now I would like your feedback on themes or topics that we could address through Webinar Wednesdays. So we might plan a future series of this kind of 1 hour webinars on Wednesday morning. And we want to address other topics of your interest. So please give us some suggestions. Outdoor learning. Yeah. Outside working with young people, yeah. Those are related. Mindful walking.
I suppose outdoor is like probably the best way forward because, you know, being indoors is problematic at the moment. So I think that's a really relevant one.
Yeah. And also the kind of practical preparing applications, project ideas, partnership building. That's right. Stress management in COVID times. Very related to today's webinar, but even more specific on stress management, using technology and links to sustainability, planning virtual events. There's loads there. Thank you so much. I'm going to the last one. any other comments. That's it. So if there's any questions to any of the speakers, this is the moment. Please raise your hand or write them on the chat. And we just give it a 2 minutes. Questions and answers.
And feel free to unmute yourself as well if you do want to ask any questions. I'd just like to say that I think it's incredible how relevant the topic was, you know, across the different sectors, and like there was different approaches, but you were all kind of thinking about the same kinds of things. And even, you know, the fact that burnout was brought up a couple of times, you know, in terms of actual staff working with young people or working with children. You know, that's obviously a big factor as well in talking about mental health and well-being. So I think it's really interesting that came up a few times, and there was a lot of things that were very much across the board, you know. So I think that, yeah, very interesting, and that's why this event was cross-sectoral, I suppose, to allow for that, to see that you're all working on the same kind of thing, you know.
Absolutely. Any question or comment for the speakers?
Or if the speakers have any questions as well.
Oh yeah, as well.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you so much, Nora, Ronnie, and Margaret, for giving us a great insight into your projects.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne.
Yeah.
Bye.
And we do apologize for the hold up and the technical difficulties, and that we're a little over time, but
There are